My name is Wendell Griffen, pastor of Millennium Church in Little Rock, Arkansas, and CEO and owner of Griffen Strategic Consulting, a firm that does cultural competency and inclusion and social justice consulting in Little Rock. I want to share with you a column that I wrote that was published in Baptist News today, April 20, 2020. Title of this column is Our National Curse, the Cruel Convergence of Trump's Presidency and the COVID-19 Pandemic. Last week, President Donald Trump announced that his administration will suspend support to the World Health Organization. The United States provided $553 million, $500 million, to support the WHO last year and was the largest national donor. In making that announcement, Trump accused the WHO of severely mismanaging and covering up the dangers and origin of the coronavirus infection. This is the president's latest and perhaps most dangerous, most despicable lie to date. The WHO warned the U.S. and other nations as early as mid-January 2020 about the risk of human-to-human infection from coronavirus. On January 30, it officially declared, quote, a public health emergency of international concern, close quote. Trump has presented no evidence whatsoever that the WHO could or should have taken those steps sooner. Moreover, when the WHO issued that notification in technical guidance notes, Trump paid no attention. On February 27, a month after the WHO published an official report that warned of human-to-human transmissibility of coronavirus and that transmissibility would be higher than seasonal influenza, Trump downplayed the threat against the advice of U.S. health and intelligence experts. Halting funding for the WHO is Trump's latest ploy to shift blame for the COVID-19 death toll from his vicious incompetence and to scapegoat a multinational organization associated with the United Nations, a body he and his white nationalist base have long despised. Trump took the same approach, you recall, when he pulled the United States out of the Paris Climate Change Accords after he became president. What makes this ploy so dangerous and despicable is that people are dying in the United States and across the world from COVID-19 infection. Americans are not dying because of anything the WHO has done or failed to do. They are dying because of what the Trump administration has done and failed to do. In this sense, the cruel suspension of U.S. support to the WHO is not only fraudulent, it is a crime against humanity. Trump minimized the coronavirus threat. He insisted that coronavirus was no more dangerous than seasonal influenza, even after health and scientific experts declared that it was exponentially more lethal than seasonal flu. He delayed declaring a national emergency out of concern about the effect on wealthy investors in the stock market if he did so. Trump lied about how many people were being tested. He lied about the availability of testing. The Trump administration refused for weeks to use validated WHO protocols for coronavirus testing. Then the administration promulgated an invalid coronavirus test that had to be scrapped. None of these things can be blamed on the WHO. In a June 2018 blog post, I likened Donald Trump to King Joffrey Lannister, a villainous character from the award-winning HBO Game of Thrones series. I quoted this line spoken by Tyrion Lannister regarding the king, his nephew, quote, "We've had vicious kings and we've had idiot kings, but I don't know if we've ever been cursed with a vicious idiot for a king," close quote. I declared then that Donald Trump is a vicious idiot, concluding the essay with these words, quote, The unpleasant reality is that Donald Trump's presidency is both a curse on the United States and a curse from the United States on the wider world. Thanks to the election of 2016, the security of our nation, sanity of our world, strength of U.S. armed forces and our NATO allies, stability of our economy, tranquility of our society, and health and welfare of our population are threatened by one reality. The President of the United States is a vicious idiot. We are cursed. Welcome to the new normal. Close quote. Trump is not merely a vicious idiot. He is a vicious idiot whose sociopathic personality threatens the whole world. Thanks to his free-market fundamentalism and white religious nationalist sycophants, the population of the entire world now will be threatened by the suspension of U.S. support for the World Health Organization. Unlike the novel coronavirus, Donald Trump is a homegrown threat to democracy, decency, and stability in the United States. Although his election was aided and abetted by Vladimir Putin and Russia, no outside power or force imposed Trump's vicious and incompetent presidency on the American population. The dangers that Martin Luther King Jr. warned about in a speech in April 1967 at Riverside Church in New York City, racism, materialism, and militarism, have been deliberately, actively, and openly cultivated in evangelical religious congregations for the past half century. Trump embodies those evils. His policies are actively enabled by racist, materialistic, and militaristic allies in all three branches of the federal government, thanks in large measure to Senator Mitch McConnell's success in staffing the federal courts with judges who will acquiesce to Trump's hateful policies. In a tragic sense, the chickens of racism, militarism, and materialism have come home to roost in the convergence of Trump's presidency and the COVID-19 pandemic. With one exception, Trump resembles former President Richard Nixon. Although Nixon, like Trump, was a racist and was a vicious sociopath, he was not an idiot. Nixon also didn't have Fox News to spew racist propaganda and a lapdog Congress to enact and a federal judiciary to judicially uphold his worst policies. Roosting chickens eventually hatch their eggs. Since Nixon, free market fundamentalists, white nationalist religious conservatives, and proponents of what President Dwight Eisenhower famously called the military-industrial complex have elected politicians who proudly question the need to protect public health, who cut vital social services, including services and access to health care, nutrition assistance, housing, and public education for people who are needy, and who questioned the need to protect people from bigotry and discrimination. Nixon was elected twice after King warned that a nation which spends more every year on war making than on programs of social uplift does so at its own peril, a peril that King called, quote, a tragic death wish, close quote. We are now seeing that tragic death wish play out in homes, neighborhoods, and communities across the U.S. and the wider world, thanks to Donald Trump's vicious incompetence and the COVID-19 pandemic. Trump's presidency demonstrates the moral and the ethical bankruptcy of the free market fundamentalism, white religious conservatism and its nationalism, white supremacy, and patriarchy associated with the religion of Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, Mike Huckabee, Robert Jeffress, and Franklin Graham, the xenophobia and the racism of Pat Buchanan, and the crass materialism of the misnamed prosperity gospel. No other national leader in U.S. history has been so vicious, so incompetent, so foolish, and so dangerous to democracy, decency, and stability. As I stated almost 2 years ago, we're cursed. Our curse, like the COVID-19 pandemic, must run its course. Sadly, The course of our curse includes Trump's incompetence, Trump's suspension of the United States contribution to the World Health Organization. It includes Trump's daily lies about how well his administration has responded to the public health crisis posed by coronavirus. And the course of our curse includes willful amnesia and deliberate disregard by so-called white national religious conservatives about Trump's vicious idiocy and shameless dishonesty. That willful amnesia and deliberate disregard has defined public religious discourse and influenced public policy for generations since the Civil Rights era, and now shapes how the U.S. is perceived by the rest of the world. I hope it will also shape how this period of U.S. history will be remembered. When future generations examine the words and actions of this period, I hope they find King's 1967 speech as prophetic as I do. I hope they discern the relationship between the moral, religious, and social perspectives of Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, Mike Huckabee, Billy Graham, and Franklin Graham, and the racist, materialist, and militarist policies that resulted in voters electing a vicious idiot who suspended aid to the World Health Organization during a deadly global pandemic. I hope future generations will condemn religious people in our time. Yes, condemn the pastors, educators, denominational leaders, and congregations who embraced those perspectives and policies and supported local, state, and federal politicians who govern by them. I hope they will not give thanks for those religionists and politicians and the suffering that occurred because of our curse. Instead, I hope they will denounce, I hope they will curse the multi-generational, moral, ethical, religious, economic, social, and political hell they inherit as a legacy from our era. Perhaps then, something akin to repentance will happen. Perhaps then, the next generation will pray for deliverance from the curse we've placed on them. Perhaps then, God will have mercy on them. Until then, our curse will continue. And as hard as it may be to contemplate, things can and might even get worse. I'm Wendell Griffen, pastor of Millennium Church in Little Rock, Arkansas, and president and CEO of Griffen Strategic Consulting. You can learn more about those congregations and my firm by Googling their names.